This conference will now be recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, all of you. Can you all see the PowerPoint?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So today we'll see uh, informed consent process. So we know for clinical trial we need to recruit participants. So initially during the phase 1 and all, we will recruit the healthy human participants. But we can see in the coming like phase 2 and phase 3 and all, we have to recruit patients. So we like healthy volunteers or patients, we have to get their consent. Um, and consent means their permission. So that says that they are ready to participate, and they will they're willing to participate in the study. So that is the consent. So from healthy volunteers as well as from human participants, we need to get their willingness or their permission to participate in the study. So, and this has to be properly documented. And we know that, like we discussed earlier, when the ethical guidelines and all came into being before that, so many issues had happened. Like many unfortunate people or many underprivileged people, they were exploited. So without their permission or forcefully, they were asked to participate in the study, and so many things happened. So after all these, because of all these things, the it is mandatory that we have to get the consent from the participants, and that process is called as informed consent process. And we use an informed consent document for that. So there is an informed consent document, and in that document there is both the patient information sheet as well as a document where the patient is or the healthy volunteer is going to sign. So it is important that it is mandatory that we get their permission. So and they join the study. So every researcher has to obtain this voluntary written informed consent. Voluntary means they are doing it by themselves. So the researcher has to obtain the voluntary written informed consent from the prospective participant, the participant who is going to be part of the study. So from the prospective participant, the researcher has to obtain the voluntary informed, written informed consent. So the participant has to give it by himself for any biomedical or and health research involving human participants. This requirement is based on the principle that competent individuals are entitled to choose freely whether or not to participate or continue to participate in the research. So here mainly we need to know three things. One is it is voluntary, and it is mandatory, and the participant is always willing to withdraw from the study also. So that is the main aspects of this voluntary written informed consent. So why it is called informed consent? Informed means the participant must know what all things are going to happen during the research. So the researcher has to educate very well like what all things, what all data will be collected, any samples will be collected, how often they are going to contact. All these things the participant must know, and after knowing, willingly he has to sign on the document. So that is called as, and the participant also should know that he is able to, or he has the freedom to withdraw from the study at any time. So that is, and this is mandatory for all researchers. Next is what all are the requirements for doing this process to get the informed consent from a participant. What all are the requirements? The participant should have the capacity to understand the proposed research and should be able to make an informed decision on whether or not to be enrolled and convey her or his decision to the researcher in order to give consent. So the participant should be competent. He should be if you are going and asking a child whether are you interested in joining the research, and if you are trying to explain to a child whether he or she will be able to give the consent. So the child is not competent enough to understand the research, or he's not competent enough to decide whether or not to participate. So the one of the basic requirement of the informed consent process is that the participant should be competent. She should not be like mentally challenged people are not competent enough to give consent, or mentally challenged, or some genetic disorders are there, or if it is a minor child, then they will not be able to give the consent. So that aspect has to be met. The participant should be competent, and he should be able to understand what is about the research that is going to happen, and he should be able to make a decision whether or not to be enrolled in the study. So that is a basic requirement. Then next is the consent should be given voluntarily and not to be obtained under duress or coercion of any sort, or by offering any undue inducements. So here the researcher should not force the participants to be part of the study. He should not offer them any like huge like they should not be giving something that is tempting the participant to be involved in the study. So such gifts or a huge amount of money or nothing of that sort should be done. Like even in the advertisement, they should not. The advertisement and all, even the advertisements are verified by the institutional review board or institutional ethics committee, like what advertisement they use to recruit the participants, so that the IARB ensures that the participants are willingly joining the research. So the researcher has to ensure that, or it is the researcher's duty that he's not forcing them to participate in the study. So under any, they should not um, threaten in any way. Maybe like we can see certain doctors and certain people in poor villages and all. These village people will be afraid of the doctor. So such kind of things should not be done, or such exploitation should not happen. So the researcher has to explain very well to the participant, and participant without any force, they have to participate. Then, in the case of an individual who is not capable of giving voluntary informed consent, the consent of LAR, it is a legally acceptable representative, must be obtained. So here it talks about people. If you want to study research in mentally challenged people, if the researcher wants to do research on mentally challenged people or any children or any person who is unconscious, any patient who is unconscious. So in that case, the researcher cannot get consent from them, because they are they are not competent enough to decide whether to participate, or they are not able to understand. So in that case, the researcher can get the consent from a legally acceptable representative. So legally acceptable representative is, in case of a child, it is the parent. Parent can give the consent to include their child for the research. So in case when the participants are incompetent, and still like if the researcher wants to do study, then a legally acceptable representative can be can give the consent. So from the legally acceptable representative, the researcher has to obtain the consent. Then it is mandatory for a researcher to administer consent before initiating any study related procedures involving the participant. So that in the first slide we discussed, like it is mandatory. Without consent, the researcher, like before even initiating the study, uh, the researcher has to obtain the um, consent. So we saw here that the prospective participant. So consent from the prospective participant means the participant who is going to be included in the study. So even before the study is initiated, the researcher has to obtain the consent. So it is mandatory for a researcher to administer consent before initiating any study related procedure involving the participant. Like for example, even before the like maybe the just the data collection part is going to be initiated. So even before that, we may think like what is there in data collection, but just the maybe the name and demographics are being collected. So even before that, the it is important that it is mandatory that they obtain the consent. Then it is necessary to maintain privacy and confidentiality of participants at all stages. So we know that in this particular research, we are collecting a lot of information from the participants, such as their history of the illness, then maybe some of the genetics traits, maybe HIV status, so maybe some other deadly disease. So all those things are collected. So it is important that uh, the researcher is maintaining the privacy and confidentiality of all the data that is being collected from the participants. So this is these are some of the requirements for getting the informed consent process. So first thing is the participant should be competent enough to understand the research, and he should be able to make the informed decision whether to be enrolled in the study. Then the consent should be given voluntarily, and the researcher should not apply any force or he should not offer something for participating in the study. Then if the participant is not competent enough, then the consent can be obtained from a legally acceptable representative. Then even before the first uh, data collection, or even before any procedure, any study related procedure is done, the it is mandatory that they do this informed consent process. Then it is also important that the researcher maintains the privacy and confidentiality of participants at all these stages. Next is what are the information that has to be given to the prospective research participants. So we discussed here that it is informed consent. Like it means that the researcher has to educate to the participant like every aspect of the research that is going to affect their decision on participation. So what all factors are there? Like what all factors are there that is affecting their decision has to be informed to the participants. So here we can see some of the essential information that has to be given to the participants. So before asking for the consent, the researcher has to educate and he has to give detailed information and discuss with the participants. And if the participant is having any queries or any any doubts, then they have to give sufficient time to understand it and to ask questions to clarify their doubts. And it is also important that the researcher explains everything, every all the aspects of the study, not just the scientific aspect, but all the aspects of the study in a language that is comfortable for the participant. So before requesting the individual's consent to participate, the researcher has to educate the participant regarding all the information, all the questions and queries has to be clarified. Any doubts if they ask, that has to be resolved. So so in a language that is that the person is able to understand. Then, as I said earlier, that ICD, informed consent document, will be having two parts. One is the patient or participant information sheet, and the other is the informed consent form. So, in the participant information sheet, what all they discussed, what all the aspects of the study will be there, and it will be explained to the participant, and also it will be given as a document to them, which is called as the participant information sheet. So, all the information that the participant should know will be included in this participant information sheet. All the information that the participant should know about the research that is going to affect their decision to participate should be included in the participant information sheet. And after this after educating them, this participant information sheet will be given to the participant, and afterwards the informed consent form will also be given. So in the informed consent form, it will be written like I am able to, I understood what all are the uh, uh, procedures that will be done in this particular research, and without any force or without any coercion, I am willing to participate in the research. Like that, it will be there in the informed consent form, and in that informed consent form, the participant has to sign. And if the participant is not competent enough to do that, then the legally acceptable representative will be signing. So, in case if the legally acceptable representative is signing, then there should also be the presence of an